The rehearsal dinner was held at the kind of place that made you feel poor just by walking through the door. Violet Caine felt it the moment the valet looked past her to the couple behind her, her sister Daphne and Daphne's fiancé, Preston, and smiled like they were the ones who mattered. Which, in this room, they were. Violet didn't have a coat to hand over. She'd taken the bus. The restaurant was called Osteria Saraceno, one of those Italian places where the menus had no prices and the flowers on every table cost more than Violet's monthly grocery bill. White orchids, real ones. She'd priced them once for a client's spreadsheet and never forgot the number. She between Daphne's college roommate and an empty chair and sat down quietly. That was what she did. She sat down quietly, and she took up as little space as possible, and she waited for the night to be over. "You're not wearing the dress I sent you," her mother said from 3 chairs away, not even bothering to lower her voice. "I didn't get it in time. I sent it 2 weeks ago. I know it didn't fit." Her mother's mouth pressed into a line that could have meant a dozen things, none of them kind. She turned back to Daphne, who was laughing at something Preston's father had said, her hand resting on Preston's arm like she'd been born knowing how to do that. Maybe she had. Some people came into the world already holding the right posture. Violet reached for her water glass and focused on breathing. She was 27 years old. She had a bachelor's in accounting, an associate's in financial analysis, and a part-time bookkeeping job that paid her just enough to keep the lights on in her apartment in Glendale. She had a cracked phone screen and a good eye for numbers and the specific kind of exhaustion that comes not from working too hard, but from spending years being invisible in a room full of people who were supposed to love you. She was the daughter their mother mentioned last, if at all. She was fine. She told herself she was fine. Preston's family had reserved the entire private dining room. 12 round tables, each one full. There were people Violet didn't recognize everywhere. Men in suits that cost more than cars, women with blowouts and gold jewelry, and that particular kind of poise that came from never having to worry about money. She kept her eyes on her plate. That was when she noticed the man at table 4. He wasn't doing anything remarkable. He was simply sitting there, one hand around a whiskey glass, the other resting flat on the table, watching the room the way a person watches traffic. Not with interest, exactly, but with the automatic calculation of someone who has spent a long time reading environments for threats. He looked like he was in his early 40s. Dark hair, a little grey at the temples. A suit that said he'd had it made, not bought. There was a scar that ran from just below his left ear to the edge of his jaw, pale and clean, old enough to have settled into his skin like it had always been there. His eyes moved across the room in slow, methodical sweeps, and when they landed on Violet for a half second, she felt it like a change in air pressure. He looked away. So did she. Daphne clinked her champagne glass, and everyone turned toward her. She was glowing the way only Daphne could glow, genuinely, effortlessly, in a way that made other people want to be near her. Even Violet, who had spent a lifetime standing in that shadow, could not pretend her sister wasn't beautiful. "I just want to say," Daphne started, and her voice broke a little, the perfect kind of break, "that having everyone I love in this room, even Violet," someone murmured, and there was a ripple of laughter at the near end of the table. It wasn't mean, exactly. That was the worst part. It was the kind of joke that only lands because it's a little true. Because everyone in that room knew that Violet was the sister who didn't quite fit, the one who showed up in the wrong dress, who took the bus, who worked with numbers instead of people, who had never in her life made a room turn toward her the way Daphne did just by breathing. Violet set down her fork. She didn't leave. She didn't cry. She did what she always did. She held very still and waited for the moment to pass. It passed. Dinner continued. She ate her risotto and watched the candles and tried not to count how many times her mother introduced Daphne to people and didn't introduce her at all. After dessert, she found the bathroom at the far end of the corridor, the one she'd mentally located when they first arrived, because she'd learned long ago to always find the nearest exit. She stood over the sink for a moment with cold water on her wrists and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked tired. She looked like someone who was doing okay, and not much more than that. When she came back out, she nearly walked into the man from table 4. He was standing in the corridor, a few feet from the bathroom door, phone in hand. He glanced up. There was a pause, the kind that happens when two people are too close and neither one wants to make it strange. "Sorry," she said, stepping to the right. He stepped to the right, too. She went left. So did he. It was such a human, clumsy thing that she almost laughed. "We're doing the hallway dance," she said before she could stop herself. He looked at her for a moment, not through her, the way most people in that room did. At her. "You're the bride's sister," he said. "The other one, yes." Something shifted in his expression, not warmth exactly. More like recognition of a category he understood. "Kellner," he said, and it took her a second to realize he was introducing himself, just the last name. Like that was enough. She didn't ask for a first name. "Violet," she said. He nodded once, pocketed his phone, and moved past her down the corridor. She stood there for a second, then walked back to the table. She spent the rest of the night not looking at table 4, which meant she spent the rest of the night very aware of where table 4 was. 3 days later, her phone rang from a number she didn't recognize. She was at her desk, or what counted as a desk, the corner of her kitchen table where she did her bookkeeping work, surrounded by receipts and printed ledgers and a half-empty mug of coffee that had been warm an hour ago. "Is this Violet Caine? Depends on who's asking." A pause, then, "Someone who was told you're the best bookkeeper in a room that didn't deserve you." She set down her pen. "What room?" "Osteria Saraceno, Thursday night." Her chest did something strange. She ignored it. "I'm not the best bookkeeper in any room. I'm adequate. Who is this?" "Kellner." She almost said, "The hallway." She caught herself. "How did you get my number, Preston?" That made her pause. Preston, Daphne's Preston, and Kellner were connected enough that Kellner could call Preston and ask for her number. She turned that over for a moment, examining what it might mean the way she examined a ledger with a suspicious balance. Something didn't add up, and she needed more information before she drew any conclusions. "What do you want, Mr. Kellner?" "A meeting. I have a problem with some numbers, and I'm told you can read numbers the way other people can't." "What kind of numbers?" "The kind that have been wrong for about 8 months, and nobody's been able to find out why." She pulled a scratch pad toward her. "Old habit." "What's the scale?" "Significant. That's not a number." There was a pause, not the uncomfortable kind, more like the pause of someone who was reassessing. Then, 7 million, over 4 quarters, give or take. She wrote down, 7M, 4Q, when do you want to meet? The office was in Pasadena, on the top floor of a building that looked like it was in the business of finance or law or both. The lobby had marble floors, and a woman at the front desk who buzzed Violet through without being asked, which meant Kellner had told her to expect someone who looked like Violet, and she wasn't going to let herself think too hard about what that meant. He was standing when she came in. Not the theatrical kind of standing, not like he was performing welcome. He was standing by the window with a file in his hand, still reading it, and he finished what he was reading before he acknowledged her. She appreciated that, actually. It meant he wasn't trying to impress her. "Sit," he said, and gestured at the chair across from the desk. She sat. He put down the file, came around to his side of the desk, and set a folder in front of her without preamble. She opened it. Inside were 4 quarters of accounts payable records, vendor payments, contractor invoices, line item expenses from 3 different business entities. The formatting was clean, but the underlying structure was a mess. Whoever had set it up had done so in a hurry, or had done so with the intention of making it hard to follow. She scanned the first page. Then the second. 8 months, she said. 8 months. These 3 entities, are they all under the same parent? They report to the same parent. Whether they're legally structured that way is more complicated. She turned to the third page, the vendor on line 42. They appear in all 3 ledgers, different names, but the account routing number is the same. You can see it if you look. She pulled a pen from her jacket pocket and circled the bottom right corner of the page. "Right here, the last 4 digits repeat." Kellner said nothing. She looked up. He was watching her with that same focused, measuring attention she'd noticed in the restaurant, the look of someone taking an inventory, filing things away. "You saw that in 30 seconds, he said. 20. Is that your leak? Part of it. What's the other part? He was quiet for a moment. Then he closed the folder on his side of the desk and leaned back in his chair. His sleeves were rolled up. The scar on his jaw caught the light. There was another one on his right forearm, partially hidden by the edge of his cuff. Just the tail of it, white against tan skin. The other part, he said, is that whoever is doing this has access to the payroll system, which means they're not a vendor. They're inside. She processed that. You have how many employees with that level of access? After I fire the right people, probably 12. You've already started narrowing it. I've been narrowing it for 2 months. I keep getting to a wall. She looked down at the folder again. How long do I have? How long do you need? A week, maybe 2. If you give me full access to the source files, not just the printouts. The printouts have already been filtered. I need to see what was filtered out. Another pause. These pauses of his, she was starting to understand, were not hesitation, they were assessment. He was deciding something each time, not stalling. Done, he said. I'll need a rate. Name one. She named a number, a fair one, not inflated, because she'd learned early that inflating made people trust you less. He didn't flinch. He wrote something on a notepad, tore off the sheet and slid it across the desk. It was twice her number. That's for the first week, he said. If you find the wall, there's more. She looked at the number. Looked at him. I'm going to find the wall, she said. I know, he said. That's why I called you. She worked from home for the first 4 days, which was how she preferred it. The source files were encrypted, and she'd had to sign 3 documents to get access to them. She'd read all 3, which she could tell surprised the lawyer who walked her through them. Most people skimmed. She never skimmed. The data was a rat's nest. Not because it was complex. Complexity she could handle. Complexity was just pattern with more layers. It was a rat's nest because it had been deliberately made to look like disorganization when it wasn't. There was a structure underneath, a logic, and it had taken Violet the better part of 2 days to find the first thread of it. The money wasn't being stolen in one place. It was being moved in small amounts across 17 different line items, nothing large enough to trigger an automatic flag, accumulating over time into something significant. It was patient work. Whoever was doing it understood accounting at a level that went beyond basic bookkeeping. On the 5th day, she found the pattern in the timing. Every transfer happened within a 72-hour window, following a payroll cycle, which meant the person doing it had visibility into payroll timing, which narrowed the 12 down to 4. She called Kellner. I'm down to 4 names, she said, without greeting. She'd noticed he didn't use preamble either, and had decided not to bother. I need one more piece of information to get to one. What do you need? Employee travel logs. Specifically, who was out of the office during the 4 payroll cycles in question. A beat. Why? Because whoever is doing this is also smart enough not to be in the building when the transfers hit. They're covering their exposure. If one name shows up absent every time, send me the 4 names. She sent them. 2 hours later, he called back. 3 of them were in the building for at least one of the cycles, he said. One wasn't. Who? He said the name. She wrote it down and looked at it for a long moment. You know him, she said. It wasn't a question. She could hear it in the quality of his silence. He's been with me for 6 years, Kellner said. She didn't say anything for a moment. She knew better than to fill a silence that needed to stay empty. I need you to be certain, he said finally. Give me 24 hours. She spent those 24 hours building a map, not a real map, a conceptual one, the kind she made when she needed to see how money moved instead of just where it ended up. She had 3 legal pads covered in her handwriting by the time she was done, arrows and account numbers and circled dates. She was certain. She called Kellner at 6 in the morning. It's him, she said. I can prove it 6 different ways. I'll need to walk you through the documentation in person, but the short version is this. The transfers route through a shell account in his wife's maiden name, and they've been doing it in amounts small enough to stay under the threshold on your compliance software. If you increase the threshold sensitivity by... Come to the office, he said. She went. He had 2 other men in the room when she arrived. She didn't ask who they were, and they didn't introduce themselves, which told her enough. She spread her legal pads on the conference table and walked Kellner through all 6 proof points, slowly, without skipping anything. He asked 2 questions. Good questions. The kind that meant he actually understood what she was showing him. When she finished, the room was quiet. "All right," Kellner said. That was all. "All right." She started gathering her pads. "Leave those," he said. She left them. One of the other men made a call and stepped out. The other one followed. She and Kellner were alone in the conference room. She became aware for the first time of how quiet the building was at 7 in the morning. The light through the windows was pale and flat, that particular LA morning light that made everything look like it hadn't decided yet what kind of day it would be. "How did you know to check the wife's maiden name?" Kellner asked. She picked up her pen and turned it between her fingers, an old nervous habit. "Because if I were doing it," she said, "that's what I would use. Something obscure but traceable to me if you knew where to look. Deniability, but with an exit route if you needed to prove it wasn't random." He looked at her. "You've thought about it. I think about a lot of things I'd never do. It's how you understand the system. That's not how most bookkeepers think. Most bookkeepers aren't looking for the thing that's wrong. They're confirming that things are right. It's a different kind of attention." Something moved in his expression. Not a smile, not quite, but something in the same neighborhood. "The additional payment will be wired by end of day," he said. She nodded. She was halfway to the door when he said, "The wedding is next Saturday." She stopped. "I'm aware," she said, without turning around. "Are you going?" She turned then. He was still sitting at the head of the conference table, one hand flat on the surface, watching her with that same level, careful attention. "I'm a bridesmaid," she said. "I don't have a choice. You always have a choice." Spoken like someone who's never tried to explain to his mother why he skipped his sister's wedding. A pause, that assessing pause. Will it be difficult? It wasn't a question, it was a statement offered as an opening. An invitation to say something true if she wanted to. She thought about the rehearsal dinner, the laughter at the table, the specific weight of standing in the same room as your family and understanding, clearly and without drama, that you have always been the footnote. "It will be what it is," she said. He nodded, once. She left. The wedding was held at a vineyard in Malibu, which was exactly the kind of place Daphne had always wanted and exactly the kind of place Violet had spent her whole life not belonging to. The bridesmaids' dresses were blush pink, which looked stunning on Daphne's college friends and made Violet look, as her mother had noted while zipping her in, a little washed out, but what can you do? The shoes had been chosen by Daphne and were half a size too small. Violet had known this since the fitting and hadn't said anything because it was Daphne's day and she'd learned to pick her battles. She stood in the correct position during the ceremony. She held the correct bouquet. She smiled when people looked at her. During the cocktail hour, she found a corner near the bar. Not at the bar because she wasn't drinking, but near enough that she had somewhere to look that wasn't people's faces, and she stood there and breathed. "You're doing that thing again," said a voice beside her. She turned. Kellner. He was in a dark suit, different from the one at the restaurant. He looked like he had no business being in a vineyard in Malibu, and also like he could not possibly care less about that. "What thing?" she said. "Making yourself small." She looked at him directly. "I'm standing here. You're standing with your back to the wall and your eyes on the exit." I recognized it. He paused. "I do it too." She didn't know what to do with that. She looked back at the party. Preston was across the room laughing with his father, one arm around Daphne. They looked like an advertisement for something. "Did you know," Violet said, "that the flowers alone for this wedding cost more than I make in 4 months? No. I priced them. When Daphne asked me to help with the budget. A beat. She didn't use my budget." "No," he said. "She used a different one." She looked at him. He was looking at the party, not at her. What does that mean? She asked carefully. It means, Kellner said, that the venue deposit was paid from a joint account that was never disclosed to you, because if it had been, you would have noticed that the account had a third signatory. The air felt strange. Preston, she said. He said nothing. Preston is the third signatory, on an account connected to one of the vendor names in my ledger, he said. Yes, I found it last week. I didn't say anything to you because it wasn't relevant to your work. It is, however, relevant to the woman your sister is marrying. Violet looked across the room at Daphne, who was laughing, head back, genuinely happy in the way that only the completely unsuspecting can be. Something went very cold and very clear in Violet's chest. How long? She said. He's been building something. I don't know what yet. But the structure is there. Why are you telling me this now? At the wedding because, Kellner said, still not looking at her, I'm going to have a conversation with Preston in about 20 minutes. And after that conversation, this wedding is going to become a different kind of event. I thought you should know before that happens. She processed this with the same focused attention she brought to a broken ledger, looking for what didn't add up, identifying the thing she needed to confirm before she could draw a conclusion. You came here to do this today. You could have done it before the wedding. Yes, why didn't you? He turned then. He looked at her the way he had in the hallway of Osteria Saraceno that first night, direct, unperformed, without the social glaze most people kept on their eyes in public. Because your sister needed to get married first, he said, for certain legal agreements to activate. Timing matters. She didn't like it, but she understood. Timing always mattered with money. And Daphne? She asked. She was not involved. You checked, I check everything. She was quiet for a moment. Around them, the cocktail hour murmured and clinked and moved in that particular wedding party way, all that performed happiness. Is she going to be all right? Violet asked. Financially. The prenuptial agreement gives her significant protection, and the joint account he opened without disclosing, that gives her grounds. You checked the prenup. I check everything, he said again. She looked at him for a long moment. He was a man who ran, by all available evidence, an organization that operated at the edge of legal and well past it, and she was a woman who balanced books for small businesses in Glendale, and they were standing together at her sister's wedding while he prepared to blow the whole event apart, for financial reasons she only partially understood. What happens to me after this? She said. What do you mean? You hired me for a specific job. I did it. The job's done. What happens now? He held her gaze. That depends on what? On whether you want to keep working for me. Her pulse did something she chose to ignore. That's a significant decision. Yes, I'd need more information, I know, about the nature of the work, the legal exposure, all of it. I'd expect nothing less, he said. You read every document before you signed it. You circled the routing number in 20 seconds. You mapped 6 proof points on legal pads before 6 in the morning. He looked at her steadily. You are exactly the kind of attention I've been trying to find for 3 years. She held his gaze. I'm not easy to work with, she said. I'm aware. Neither am I. I ask a lot of questions. Good. And I don't look the other way. Something in his expression shifted, just slightly. I'm not asking you to. Across the vineyard, she could see Preston, still laughing, still holding her sister's hand. In 20 minutes, she understood, everything in Daphne's life was going to change. And Violet, who had spent her entire existence as the afterthought, the footnote, the sister who didn't fit, Violet was the only person in this room, besides Kellner, who knew it was coming. She looked down at the shoes that were half a size too small. She looked back at Kellner. Tell me the number, she said. What number? Whatever you're about to offer me. Tell me the number first, and then tell me what you need. He told her both. She turned the numbers over in her mind. The rate, the scope, the timeline, the risk she could quantify, and the risk she couldn't. She did the math the way she always did, fast and quiet and without ceremony. All right, she said. He nodded. Once. All right, he said, and it sounded like a door opening.